It's Tuesday, July 30th, 2024. Bowling for a packed SCOTUS. My spidey senses are going off about Roy Cooper in North Carolina. And Trump says Melania was traumatized. Next on the AM Update. President Biden and Vice President Kamala are calling on Congress to impose term limits and a code of conduct on the Supreme Court, while also drafting limits on presidential immunity. Biden discussed the proposed reforms during remarks on Monday at the Lyndon B. Johnson Presidential Library.
We've had term limits for presidents of the United States for nearly 75 years after the Truman administration. And I believe we should have term limits for Supreme Court justices of the United States as well. In fact, the United States is the only major constitutional democracy that gives lifetime seats in their high court. Term limits would help ensure that the court membership changes with some regularity. That would make timing for the court's nomination more predictable and less arbitrary. Reduce the chance that any single presidency imposes undue influence in generations to come.
Yeah, whatever. This is a quasi-intentional plan on the part of the White House to continue to divide focus, at least amongst their base, about the obvious still, I believe, just ineptitude of Kamala Harris, while also saying and making the case to the rest of the country, no, our president is still competent. He's still kicking. He's still alive, at least. Chuck Schumer also discussed the proposed changes to the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court is a morass. First, it's an ethical morass. The idea that wealthy individuals, many of them right-wing, can both pay for cases before the court and at the same time give justices gifts or trips is outrageous. And frankly, Chief Justice Roberts isn't doing enough to curb it. But it's a morass in even a worse way. This is a MAGA right-wing court. It's already taken away the right to choose. It could very well go further on that. I fear it will. It's siding with the wealthiest of individuals and the powerful interests over the average working family. And it even threatens democracy when it says that a president can get immunity even for certain acts in the presidency. So this court is just a morass, both ethically and substantively.
Again, that's Chuck Schumer over the weekend talking about the proposed changes to the Supreme Court that the Biden-Kamala administration wants to foist upon that institution. Hey, listen, I'm all for term limits as much as the next guy, but that's not really what this is about. This is basically virtue signaling. This is the Mike Johnson or pick your Republican Speaker of the House show vote version from the administrative level. Okay. They're never going to propose term limits for members of Congress. They're never going to propose term limits or at least employment limits on members of the entrenched bureaucracy. This is just red meat for their base. This is their version of the right-wing version of a flag-burning amendments that are talked about when news is slow and hearings are few and far between. That's all this basically is. Now, my spidey senses are tingling about this story. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper has taken himself out of consideration to be Kamala's running mate, according to two sources familiar with the discussions, and a sign that an accelerated search has entered a new phase. A decision could come within a week, with Kamala's goal to make an announcement before August 7th. She intends to have private conversations with top contenders, sources say, but it was unclear whether those discussions have started. Cooper, whose friendship with Harris dates back to their time serving as attorneys general of their respective states, was the oldest candidate under consideration. His age 67 was seen by some Democrats to be at odds with Harris's push for a vigorous and younger ticket. I don't know. Something feels fishy about this story. Again, this is not coming from Governor Cooper himself, but rather sources close to the governor. I might talk about this a little bit more later in the week. Looking abroad, even though official tallies from all 15,000 voting stations in Venezuela have yet to be released, Nicolas Maduro, the socialist president of Venezuela, has been declared the winner of last weekend's elections. prompting international leaders, including the Secretary of State in the Biden-Kamala administration, to question the results. On Saturday, Venezuelans began gathering in long lines, waiting for the chance to cast their votes for the nation's next president sometime on Sunday. They had two options: Maduro, who came into power in 2013 following the death of socialist dictator Hugo Chavez, and Edmundo Gonzalez Urita, a 74-year-old politician neophyte who became the opposition leader after Maria Corina Machado was disqualified from running a year ago for, quote, being involved in the corruption plot orchestrated by the usurper Juan Guaido. Guaido ran against Maduro back in 2018 and was even recognized as the winner by several foreign leaders, though Maduro was ultimately declared the official winner. The results of the 2024 election began to be tallied on Sunday evening, and Urita and his supporters were encouraged when early returns suggested they had a landslide victory. According to Machado, the tallies she and her group viewed, representing about 40% of the total vote, showed Urita with 70% of the votes in this election and Maduro with 30%. Later that night, Venezuelan authorities reportedly stopped sharing the official results with the opposition, and workers still hadn't closed the polls an hour after the scheduled closing time. Then, after midnight, reportedly Maduro-friendly National Electoral Council announced that with 80% of the votes tabulated, Maduro held an insurmountable lead over Urita, 51.2% to 44.2%. Yeah, this is just the latest example that you can vote your way into communism. You certainly can't vote your way out. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas put forth a bill yesterday aimed at curbing the influence of China and other maligning actors in U.S. schools. Cruz authored the Senate's version of the Transparency and Reporting of Adversarial Contributions to Education, or TRACE Act. The legislation requires schools to give parents the ability to review or trace any curriculum provided by foreign actors or purchased with foreign funding. Cruz said it's imperative that such guardrails be put into place as American adversaries see the younger generation as a ripe target. Cruz said in a statement, quote, the Chinese Communist Party exerts vast resources to control what Americans see, hear, and ultimately think. Man, what shape are we in where it requires an act of Congress to ensure that, I don't know, maybe foreign actors like China don't get to educate your children? Elizabeth Warren just last week said that she's really excited about Kamala Harris because she's the most accomplished vice president in U.S. history because she visited a baby killing facility. She's back this week to share more reasons why she's excited about Kamala.
The border, to have more resources in the states and cities that are supporting migrants. And I believe we need to create a pathway to citizenship. All of that is a part of what we need to do for comprehensive immigration reform. Kamala Harris will work with Congress and get that done.
Some estimates say that it's around 11 million illegals who have come into this country since Joe Biden took over. And Elizabeth Warren is excited because Kamala Harris will work with Congress to make sure all those 11 million people get a pathway to citizenship. So, kill all your babies and let all the people from hitherto unknown countries just into the country, into this country, to replace all the babies that you killed. That is the Harris plan. That's the Harris plan. It's going to be a train wreck if she gets in, guys. An absolute unmitigated disaster. Former President Donald Trump has agreed to be interviewed by the FBI as part of an investigation into his attempted assassination in Pennsylvania earlier this month. The expected interview with the 2024 Republican presidential nominee is part of the FBI's standard protocol to speak with victims during the course of its criminal investigations. The FBI said last week that Trump was struck in the ear by a bullet or fragment of one during the July 13th assassination attempt at his rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Through more than 450 interviews, the FBI has fleshed out a portrait of the gunman, Thomas Matthew Crooks, that reveals him to be a highly intelligent but reclusive 20-year-old whose primary social circle was his family and who maintained few friends and acquaintances throughout his life. Even in online gaming platforms that Crooks visited, his interactions with peers appeared to have been minimal, according to the FBI. Laura Ingraham interviewed Donald Trump about what the impact on his family was over his attempted assassination. Listen to this.
What was Melania's reaction, if you don't mind my asking? I know this is very personal, when she learned about what happened on that field in Butler.
She was watching.
Oh, she was watching in real time?
She was watching live. It was all over the place. It was on television. It was on your network, but it was all over the place. And she was watching. I asked her that. I mean, I wasn't there. I was on the ground. And when the world started to, like, you could talk to people, I said, so what was your feeling? And she can't really even talk about it.
Traumatized.
Which is okay, because that means she likes me.
Facebook acknowledged that it mistakenly censored the iconic image of Trump with his fist raised in the immediate aftermath of that assassination attempt. A post on Mark Zuckerberg's social media site by a user with the handle End Wokeness showed the Republican presidential candidate defiantly pumping his fist in the air while blood streams down his face. It had been initially tagged as misinformation. The user was threatened with being deplatformed. However, on Monday, Danny Lever, a spokesperson for the social network's parent company Meta, admitted the tech giant made a mistake. More international news. The leader of Turkey over the weekend threatened military intervention in Israel to stop Jerusalem's war in Gaza in a significant escalation of rhetoric from NATO's second largest military. Again, they're supposed to be an ally with us. In a meeting with his Justice and Development Party, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Turkey must be very strong so that Israel can't do these ridiculous things to Palestine. According to a Reuters report, he went on, just like we entered Karabakh, just like we entered Libya, we might do similar with them. Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz came back swinging and suggested Erdogan would meet a similarly deadly fate as Iraq's former president, Saddam Hussein, who was executed by hanging in 2006. Wow, what a wonderful, speaking of Chuck Schumer's morass, what a wonderful time in the Middle East. And finally, I said earlier that it would be an unmitigated disaster should Kamala Harris. It's just objectively speaking true. Say what you want about the alternative. I'm sure there are differing opinions on that. I just think objectively, just from a competency standpoint, from a political standpoint, from a world leadership standpoint, it would be an unmitigated disaster. She's a total incompetent person. Just totally incompetent. So what do I mean by that? Listen to this montage from montage maker extraordinaire at Mazemore.
There are reports that say that you have the lowest approval rating of any vice president.
Well, there are polls that also say I have great approval ratings.
Swing voters don't like Harris. How big a drag is Kamala Harris on the ticket?
She's a pretty big drag. I think she was arguably Biden's worst political decision.
They don't like her. There's lots of reasons they don't like her.
Kamala Harris's approval rating is now at 28%, which is an historic low for any modern vice president.
We're hearing it from mainstream media, one outlet after another, one leak after another. That Kamala Harris is the worst vice president ever, the worst politician ever.
We don't see the vice president. What people are saying to me, and I'm sure they're saying it to you, where's the vice president? Some White House officials are feeling that she came off looking unprepared for inevitable questions about when she might visit the southern border.
We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I mean, I don't understand the point that you're making.
The point that Lester Holt was making was obvious to anyone else who was watching this interview, which is that the issues at the border are inextricably linked with the portfolio that she's been given.
The border is secure. We have a secure border.
Bidenomics is working.
Prices have gone up. And families and individuals are dealing with the realities of that bread costs more, that gas costs more. And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up.
He picked Kamala Harris to be his running mate. She was ranked and is ranked as the most liberal senator in the United States Senate. So he could have gone the other way, but he went to the left.
Joe Biden is running for re-election, and I will be his ticket mate. Full stop. Full stop. That's it.
So what do I mean by it would be an unmitigated disaster if Kamala Harris got into the White House? Yes, she and the people around her would be a disaster for this country from a policy and governing perspective. If they are able to govern competently on anything, you know the policy that they're going to govern over is going to be terrible. That's even if they are able to govern to begin with. But the bigger disaster is what it says about we the people. You heard ABC News there. You heard MSNBC. You heard ABC. You heard CNN. You heard Jimmy Kimmel. You heard Michael Moore, all critical of Kamala Harris. All critical of her. Talking about how unpopular and how terrible she is. This would be the biggest disaster. Because if they're able to rehab that in just a period of a few months, all the way to the White House, it means once and for all, we the people aren't capable of doing any better than Kamala Harris. That's why I say it's a disaster. I hope that doesn't happen. A month and a half ago, I would have said, I don't want to vote for Biden. I really don't want, but I'm certainly not voting for him. I really hope that Joe Biden doesn't win, or by extension, Kamala Harris doesn't win, but I don't want to vote for Trump. I'm voting for Trump now, and I still really hope that Kamala Harris does not win. That's it for a Tuesday. We'll be back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.